Well, Raluca, it's really nice to see you again. I trust you're keeping well during these pandemic times.
I am nice to see you too, Rodney. I think last time we saw each other was in Amsterdam, but it seems like ages ago, doesn't it?
Just an age ago. I can't remember the last time I got on a plane. Maybe this summer. Let's wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, so it has been a while. Tell me what's been going on in Europe recently.
What hasn't been going on in Europe recently? It's been such a busy time, and it's actually quite exciting for those of us working in tax and in EU tax law in particular, because something happens almost every week, so they're keeping us on our toes. Just this week, we've seen changes to the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. So that was on Monday. There were some movements there with Dominica added to the so-called blacklist and Barbados moved to the gray list. So that was quite interesting. Australia got an extension, so they're now still on the gray list rather than being moved to the blacklist. So that's good news for companies that have business connections with Australia. So yeah, that was at the beginning of the week. And then mid this week on Wednesday, there was a debate in a working party in the Council of the EU on the EU FTT proposal. So Portugal now holds the presidency of the Council, and they seem very keen on some of these files that have been on the table for a very long time, but none of the other presidencies have been able to make progress on them. And the EU FTT is one of them, so they're now discussing just to get a feeling of where member states are positioned on this particular file. They might go on with an EU FTT proposal based on the French and Italian model. So we're keeping an eye on that as well. And today there was by today I mean Thursday on the 25th of February, there was a public debate in one of the council configurations on public country by country reporting. And I think this is a really important file for most of our clients because it would require them to disclose publicly quite a bit of information related to their tax affairs, obviously on a country by country basis. And again, this is a file that has been on the back burner since 2016, when the Commission first came up with the proposal. And the issue here is that member states don't really seem to agree. Some of them feel very strongly about framing this as a tax proposal, meaning that they would need to unanimously agree for the file to be adopted, whereas other member states are comfortable with what the Commission initially proposed, which is a file that would be approved under qualified majority voting. And as you can imagine, that would be much easier to move ahead because not all the member states have to agree. So today they debated again to see where they stand. And it did seem like there might be a chance for the Portuguese presidency to be able to get this approved. But we will have to see what happens in the working groups if that majority is maintained. So yeah, very interesting.
So that's a lot of stuff.
I know.
Just thinking back to that last one that you just mentioned, the public reporting. Is there any sense as to what sort of timeline that's on? Because that's a topic that's of interest to just so many people.
Well, not really, because it has been in deadlock for so long. We don't really know exactly what will happen. We can speculate, particularly after the debate today, where there did seem to be very strong political support to move this ahead. So maybe we would see something, if member states did agree on it, maybe we would see something in force from 1st of January 2023, I would guess. But really, that is just a wild guess at this point. We will continue to monitor, and we inform everyone with our tax alerts on what happens on these files.
So clearly a watch the space kind of world.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, look, you were also sharing with me, you've been doing a lot of work in the area of permanent establishment. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, I have to say that is because we receive a lot of questions on permanent establishment risks during the pandemic and also post-pandemic. But I have a personal interest in it as well because I also work remotely sometimes, and that's interesting to see the impact of it. What we tried to do was to figure out what will happen after the pandemic ends. Because we do have some guidance from the OECD and also from some jurisdictions as well on their position during these times when there are all sorts of temporary restrictions in place. People work remotely, not necessarily because they choose to do that, but because they're forced by measures taken by their government. What we wanted to do was to see what would happen when those restrictions are lifted. People are free to travel again, but they choose not to do that. So they continue to work from home as a choice. And I have to say that based on the survey that we did, my main conclusions are it's very difficult to predict how these things are going to be dealt with. So how high a risk of creating a permanent establishment there is when someone works from home, or if there are any dual residency issues, for example, when executives work from home and they join board meetings virtually. So that is a big concern. The other main conclusion is that this is a case-by-case analysis. So I've not seen anything from any country to suggest a clear-cut answer. Most of our respondents have indicated based on their experience and maybe based on discussions with their tax authorities that every time we look at one of these cases, it has to be, the decision has to be based on the facts and circumstances of each individual case. We looked at, for example, agency PE issues. So what happens if an employee works from their home jurisdiction and concludes contracts in the name of their employer that is based in another jurisdiction? And there, I think it's a little bit more clear because most countries have adopted this habitually test from the OECD. So if an employee would conclude contract now or after the pandemic, then that would probably create a higher PE risk. Interestingly, we also asked questions regarding what happens if the majority of customers are in that same jurisdiction where the employee is located, or is there a difference between those cases and cases where customers are located in other countries? And it seems that that doesn't really make a difference. What's most important is where the contracts are negotiated from, where they are concluded, where orders are received, and so on and so forth. So it's quite standard international tax issues, let's say, and that won't change post-pandemic. I think what would be interesting to see is when a fixed place of business is created, because that requires the degree of continuity. But there's also this question around whose decision is it for the employee to work from home? Is it them that have decided to do so, or is it their employer requiring them to do so? Is the home office at the disposal of the employer? So all those questions really need to be looked at, and again, as I said, addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Well, that's fascinating, Raluca, because, and it's a really important piece of work because with the pandemic, right, you do have people that are stranded in different countries. You do have offices that are closed, so people are having to work from home. And although we won't stay like this forever, things will return somewhat to normal. In many ways, this is the new normal, and this is the sort of issue that many companies are just going to have to grapple with.
Exactly. And I think tax authorities are a bit more lenient now because of the restrictions that are in place, but they might take further, and I don't want to say aggressive, but just firmer stances once this is over. So maybe now they are okay with board meetings being held virtually and the residency or nationality of directors not being relevant. But I think unless they specifically clarify these things going forward, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in that space because we simply don't have enough guidance yet.
Well, just fascinating. Well, Raluca, so that's really interesting to hear just the extent of stuff that's going on in Europe, and we're going to keep an eye on this public reporting point in particular, and the thoughts around permanent establishment, just really timely in terms of what everyone's dealing with. So I got to believe those things are just keeping you super busy at the moment. Yes. Thank you very much for your time today, Raluca.
Thank you, Rodney. Good to see you.
It's good to see you again.